Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. My name is Nicholas, and I am the host for tonight. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. And here is a kind reminder to maintain good hygiene and practice social distancing when heading out. This series of broadcasts is brought to you by our fellow JPO members and some of the world's greatest musicians that wishes to share their knowledge and help aspiring musicians through their musical journey. With this, we hope that we are providing opportunities for everyone with different interests to learn not only about music performance, but also transferable life skills. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please leave them in the Q&A box below. For those tuning in on YouTube, please leave your questions down in the chat box. Tonight, Jesselton Philharmonic Orchestra is glad to have Lavell Blackwell with us to chat about putting on a recital in a pandemic. Lavelle Blackwell is well known as a composer, singer, lyricist, and music director, and is currently a doctoral candidate in composition at New England Conservatory of Music, studying with Dr. Kadi Agoch. He was the most recent winner of the Boston Modern Orchestra Project's composition competition for his chamber orchestra work, Effleurage. His other chamber work has won NEC's Honors Ensemble Composition Competition 3 times for his brass quintet entitled Connective, the woodwind trio Paces, and his string quartet Discarded Vernacular. His suite of pieces for saxophone duet, Bio Songs, commissioned by members of the Jamaica Plain Saxophone Quartet, received a world premiere as part of the Boston New Music Festival in November 2020. He is currently working on various commissioned chamber works for musicians throughout the Boston area. Additionally, he holds a Master of Music degree from New England Conservatory, where he studied with Malcolm Payton. Now let us welcome Lavell Blackwell into our session.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Hi, Lavell. So can you share with us a bit more about the video that we just watched at the beginning?
Sure. So those were clips from all of the performances from my recent recital, which was done on April 3rd. The title of the recital was called Color Schemes, and you might have noticed in the video that all of the performers were wearing black on the bottom and then colorful shirts on top in solid colors. So the whole performance was organized around colors. And so that's what you just saw clips of.
Okay, so tell me more about the recital requirements to earn your degree. Are there other requirements such as composition requirements as well?
Yes, so to complete the doctoral degree at New England Conservatory, all composition majors have to present a recital, an evening length professional grade recital of chamber works. So my particular recital was organized around a theme. Like I said, it was called Color Schemes. And that was one of the requirements. You also have to do a dissertation piece, which is of at least 25 minutes for orchestra. So those are the 2 main composition requirements to complete the degree.
I see. So I understand when musicians put on a recital, we usually think of a theme for our repertoire or select our repertoire based on an idea. So you mentioned that your recital is themed around color schemes. So what was the main idea of your recital and how did you get the inspiration for that?
So the initial inspiration was this comment that my studio teacher, Dr. Kadi Agoch, made in one of our first lessons, where she challenged me to write more coloristically, which basically means playing a little bit more freely with musical color in my compositions. And so I challenged myself to write a series of pieces that only explored musical color. So all of the pieces have a different instrumentation. They're written for different instruments. Some solos, there's a piano trio. There is one that's quartet that you heard, a string quartet. And so that became the organizing theme for my recital. Each piece explores a different palette of colors. And so that's why they're called palettes, and the program is called Color Schemes. I will now show you a couple of slides from the dress rehearsal and the promotional poster. So this is the promotional poster that I created for the recital. You can see that it is also organized around bright colors. Even though all of my photos are in black and white, I put all of the lettering in colors. Like, everything is organized around the same theme. Even the names of the performers are all in bright colors. So these are some of the musicians. This is from the dress rehearsal. This is palette number 1, which was the first piece that you heard in the clip. This is Christy, Lillian, Kaishin, and Taylor. Then this is from palette number 3, which was the third piece. This is a up-and-coming chamber group that is in Boston right now. They just were selected to be the professional piano trio at New England Conservatory, so that is a great opportunity for them. I hope to work with them again in the future. They're called Trio Gaia. So this is from the dress rehearsal. This is palette number 4, which was for string quartet. It's Nozomi, Yunha, Julian, and Dilshad. String quartet for that. This is so palette number 4 is the last piece in the series. So they're playing, so they ended the first half of the recital, and then there was an intermission, and then we did the second half. And so this was the first act kind of closer. So this was like a big piece. It was also the longest piece on the program. This is the brass quintet, which I was amazed to actually get a brass quintet to perform on my recital, considering that wind instruments are a little trickier to get in the current circumstances. Anything that involves winds or the voice is a little bit harder to kind of work with. You have to have more restrictions for health and safety. And so they were the piece that actually closes the whole program. This is my introduction that I did before the recital. This is the actual performance now, not the dress rehearsal. And so that's me standing there in my mask, in my PPE. And then these are just the performance photos of the first piece. This is the palette number 1, which was a world premiere. You'll see the same performers, but they're now, in performance attire. This is, again, palette number 3. You can see that they're all wearing like different colors. This is palette number 4. So one of the pieces on the program was a pre-recorded oboe solo that is not part of the palette series, but it was part of the program. So this performer, who I think you guys interviewed maybe on a previous broadcast, and he and I know each other, and he commissioned me to write a solo oboe piece. Mm-hmm. And so it was on the program. And this is the oboist. This is a projection of the score. In the recital, we projected the score because we didn't have the actual performer, so that they could actually like read along with the music. It was actually really cool. And then this is the final performance.
Okay, so how long was the whole performance from
beginning to end? It was, so because there has to be a half an hour intermission, and we could talk about that later, to recirculate the air in the room. It ended up taking about 2 hours total.
Okay. And how long was the whole preparation from the time you began composing one of the pieces till the
Yeah, so I started writing these pieces after that lesson with my teacher, and that was 3 years ago. So I've been kind of planning for this recital for 3 years, but the actual like logistical preparation didn't really start until like mid-February. So I would say about 2 months ago.
All right, interesting. So looking at the photos from your recital, it seemed like you had to work with a lot of musicians to put your recital together. So was that a particular challenge for you? And did you consider doing a smaller recital?
So it is always a challenge to try to put together a recital of completely original works, because first you have to write all of that music. You have to write enough music to actually put a recital together, which is the first challenge. And when you are writing music, you're not always thinking about like having to put everything together. And so I wrote a bunch of pieces that were for a lot of different instrumentations. And so once it came to preparing for the recital, I knew suddenly that I had to try and find I had to find a total of 17 musicians. And I actually cut some of the music. I cut one of the pieces because I didn't want to have to try and find 2 string quartets instead of 1. It was just too much. So to answer your question, if I considered a smaller recital, I mean, I kind of wish I'd done a smaller recital once I was planning it, but I didn't actually plan for a smaller recital. Some composers, like, it depends on kind of what you want. My system of organization was more around like ideas, thematic material. Like, you can just say, I want to write all piano solos or all string quartets, and then you would just have to hire or like find one string quartet, and then they can just play the entire recital. Some of the composers do their recitals that way, but I chose not to because I wanted to have a variety. So yes, it was a challenge.
So was 17 musicians like the typical number of musicians that composers would work with at your no?
No, I would say no. Most people, and especially considering that we had to work with a lot of restrictions, but I would say my composition recital was kind of exceptional for how large it was as a performer, as an entire performance. I think that most composers tend to have smaller recitals that use fewer musicians and just have those musicians play more music. But because I had written so much music and I wanted to get as much of it on the program as I could, I just decided to go large. Like, I just went on large scale.
So was the program performed in front of an audience, or was it broadcasted online?
So it was live streamed, and there was a limited audience. It's funny because at the last minute, NEC, New England Conservatory, actually changed their policy so that you could have a limited number of audience members live, but I didn't have enough time to actually, so I did have a few people. There were a few people in the audience, but not very many. It was mostly like a couple of my friends who were also composers and the other musicians that were playing on the program, on the recital. When they weren't playing, they were part of the audience. And then it was live streamed, and that audience was like much larger because anyone, there were more people than I was expecting who actually watched the live stream. I was really just thinking that it was going to be kind of like my family and my friends and like my teachers at NEC, but it actually got a pretty large online audience, which I was very proud of. And I was happy that the musicians, there were some people who were watching in Singapore, actually, which is kind of interesting because it's a 12-hour time difference from Boston. As you know, are you in Kuala Lumpur?
Or not exactly. We're in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Malaysia, it's also 12 hours difference. But in Singapore, my recital was at 4 p.m. on Saturday. And so it would have been 4 o'clock in the morning in Singapore, and people were still watching. They were friends of the pianist. One of my pianists, the solo piano player, is from Singapore. And so her friends were watching it at 4 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to tell them, it's going to be recorded, so you can just watch it later and get some sleep. But it was a good, like, it was a good time, and I got like a lot of really good like feedback on the performance.
So do you see that as a positive impact in your recital, having an international audience instead of having limited to just Boston?
Oh, certainly. It really opened up my network. I think that like I wouldn't have met like the Jesselton Philharmonic if I hadn't like opened myself up to kind of a larger audience. It's a weird benefit, I think, of having everything forced to be remote. That on one hand, we're all kind of isolated, but on the other hand, because we have so much online capability and like video chat capability, that you can collaborate potentially with people all over the world and gain an audience with people all over the world. So yes, I had there were two students on my recital that were definitely international, but I'm not sure. I think one is definitely from Singapore that I know. Keishin is from Singapore. The other one I think is international, but I'm not 100% sure what country she's from. So I apologize to her for that. She played a different piece that wasn't in the video clip. And then, Nicholas Tischerman, who you guys know, is in Colorado, and he never flew to Boston for the live performance. It was just all pre-recorded. So we worked entirely over Zoom. Like our entire collaboration has been over Zoom and on Facebook chat and on email. But it's been a sort of interesting experience. Getting that pre-recorded performance was probably one of the more difficult things about putting this recital together, because we had to get it so that we had to change the room, like the actual venue for the performance, so that we could put that video on it.
Having 17 musicians and having a recording of a performance, did you need a big budget to put up a concert like this, or was it actually similar to any other recitals?
So again, I was unique in that I decided to actually compensate the musicians a little bit, not as much as kind of what they were worth, but I saved up my own money for this performance, so that I just wanted to make sure that I could honor the musicians a little bit for their work on my music by, just paying them a little bit. And so it's funny because this brings up another, not incident, that's not the right word, but another thing that happened over the course of like 6 weeks. So I used this, this app called highernotes.com, which was started by a person who was also an NEC alumnus who lives on the West Coast of the United States now. And what I did was I created the recital on that website and then basically put the musicians there so that I could put the money all in the same place and just like pay them out of that. Like, it just made things a lot simpler. And the CEO of Higher Notes was so impressed that I decided to do a recital with 17 musicians on his site that he decided to actually reimburse some of the money that I put up so that I could save some cash on my end. And on top of that, he matched the same reimbursement and then increased the musicians' fees so that we could pay them more. It was amazing, and I was not expecting it at all.
So it's like one of the benefits of having your recital online. And
yeah, exactly. It was, but I feel like I just got very lucky in that aspect because I wasn't expecting it, but I did. It was important to me that I was able to actually like just compensate them a little bit because I knew that my music is not the easiest music to work on. And so I kind of wanted to honor that. And I know it's also important to like, get musicians to commit. And I know that you guys do a lot of like philanthropic work and stuff like that. And we can talk about that later. It's great what you guys are doing, I think. But yeah, it helps with outreach. It helps with just sort of building your network, meeting more musicians.
Yeah. So let's move on. So we have lived under this whole COVID-19 situation for more than a year, actually. And throughout this year, music venues have been closed to public. Universities have shifted online when possible. So understandably, it's no longer as easy as it was to bring musicians together and put on a live performance. So what were some of the challenges that you faced when putting on a live performance during this global pandemic?
That is a really great question. So the first thing that I had to negotiate, and this is going back to your earlier question about did I want to do a smaller recital? New England Conservatory for their performance venue, first of all, they closed all of the performance venues to outside. Normally it's like you can rent the space or like, anyone can rent the space as long as it's available. That includes Jordan Hall, which is like a landmark, and a lot of the smaller halls get rented by outside, and they closed all of that. In addition, all of the student required recitals, which they only allowed required recitals. No additional recitals were allowed. So, and then their restriction initially was you couldn't have more than 8 performers total on your recital. And I thought that at first I thought I was like, oh goodness, I'm in trouble because I have like twice that many people signed up and committed to the date. But what they said is that as long as there's no more than like 8 at a time on stage, then you can have the musicians, because for a composition recital, you're just going to need more normally. So they allowed me to actually have more musicians than 8, which was great. But the policy officially was, if it was an aerosol producing instrument, then it was maximum 30 minutes that you could play in the space before the space has to circulate for 1 hour afterwards. So you had to plan it. So aerosol producing instruments are brass, wind, and the voice. So anything that shoots out air. You could only play for half an hour maximum, and you had to clear the room for an hour, so nobody could be in the room for an hour. So their suggestion was you could either do the aerosol instruments in the first group and then circulate the room for an hour, and then do everything that didn't have aerosols in the second half. And for that, you could play for an hour with non-aerosols. Also, all the non-aerosol instruments have to wear masks the whole time. And then after that, the room has to circulate for a half an hour. So what I did was all of the first instruments, all of the first, the pieces on the first half of the program, I did all of the strings and the piano stuff and the percussion in the first half of the program. And the very first piece, palette number 1, I just completely rewrote it. It was originally written for flute and a bassoon, and I rewrote it for a violin and a cello so that I could put it on the first half of the program. So I rewrote music, I reordered the music, I did all of that so that I could have it all in the same hour, and then I could do a half hour of clearing the room, and then I could do the brass quintet at the end. So you had to be very careful about planning. And I had meetings with the concert hall's office to make sure that I was not violating their policy. Also, apparently you're supposed to not leave the room. Like, all of the musicians were supposed to stay in the room for the whole hour. We didn't really do that, but like that was the official policy, and it was very strict. Even the rehearsals were also very strictly regimented along the same lines. You had to sign up for if I wanted to do a coaching session with one of the groups, then you had to sign up beforehand. You could only play for max half an hour if it's an aerosol, or an hour if it's not an aerosol, and then you had to clear the room for either half an hour or an hour. So yeah, those are all very specific challenges. Yeah.
Oh, were these restrictions like the same across the state or the nation, or were these just NEC specific?
So they were, I'm not sure. It seems like they were NEC specific, but they were also in reaction to the statewide regulations, because it happened, I want to say toward the end of March, NEC changed the policy, because it was that you couldn't have more than 15 people in the room total at any time. But then they changed that so that you could have a few audience members, and then they allowed, if you wanted, you could have outside, outside of NEC audience members, you could have 3, and they all had to sign up 72 hours beforehand to actually enter the space, and they had to wear a mask. They also have this, NEC had its own testing policy for COVID, which all of the musicians had to do every week. It was very challenging.
You mentioned that the musicians have to stay in the same room for an hour. So I'm wondering, how did they do their warm up? Did they have to do that in a special room?
So I didn't have most of them actually came already warmed up, but a lot of them also did their warming up in the hall and also backstage before the performance. I don't know if you got a sense of the space from the video clips, but it's a pretty large room. So there was a curtain area that they could go behind and do a little warm up before.
Okay. Yeah, so looking forward from 2021, what are some of your upcoming projects?
Well, so the next thing, so I have 2 that are coming up pretty immediately. I'm doing a recording of my orchestra piece that is my dissertation work to get my degree. I've been given what is called the Presser Graduate Music Award, in order to put that recording together. So that is the next immediate project. And then in July, I am doing the Tanglewood Music Center as a composition fellow. So those are my next steps.
Were there a lot of pandemic projects that you've done in this year?
There were a few. I did a bunch of well, there's the online collaboration that I did with Nicholas Tischerman, which was that was a lot of fun, actually. I liked working with him. Bio Songs, the premiere was a virtual premiere in November, this suite for saxophone duets. There was also a pianist that I know who did a recital and commissioned a piece for me for that. That was just like a solo piano, very short, like 2 minutes. And he did that, and he like, opened a Venmo if people wanted to do donations for that. And there's another group called Sunflower that is a string quartet and a percussionist, and they commissioned a work for me. I don't know when they're performing that. I should check in about that, actually. But they have a series that's entirely online where they premiere short works, short new works.
All right. So I think we are coming to an end. So one last question is,
sure.
What do you think of JPO and the activities that we are doing right now?
I think it's amazing, actually. I listened to your Coriolanus overture, which I thought was really great. I love how much educational outreach you guys do. I think it is really important to foster an appreciation for music early. And I think it's also just important more generally to kind of foster discipline and versatility and just like an appreciation for learning. So I'm glad that you guys are contributing positively to the world that way and continuing to do so.
All right.
And continue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, do you have some more to add?
No. It's just that a couple of questions appeared in the chat.
Yes, we do have. Well, yeah, if you have nothing to add on, then we can move on to our Q&A.
No, I just want to say that, like, I think you guys are doing really great work, just generally. Like, you guys are doing a lot. Like, you started in 2007, and in 13 years, you've managed to, like, grow into kind of a huge global, like, force.
A network.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So for our audience, if you have any questions, please remember to pop them in our Q&A box or the chat box if you're from YouTube. And I have some questions already here, so let's start with those. Hi, do you think it is crucial for a composer to be equipped with organizing skill like organizing concerts?
Yes, definitely. It is extremely helpful, and I think sorry, I had to adjust my chair. One of the things about doing the doctoral degree is that as a composer, you have to figure out a way to put together an entire recital, which is a challenge. No matter how you decide to do it, not everyone had to go as big as I did. But it is always a challenge because you have to, first of all, get the music written and get it so that it is performable by musicians if you're not in the room. And you have to, make sure that the space is secure, the times are secure, the musicians are secure. It is a lot. But I kind of benefited from having some work experience where I've like organized large scale like educational programs and stuff like that. So I kind of had some experience with like putting together a large event.
Okay.
So it is helpful, and it doesn't have to be music.
The next question we have here is, what would you say is the biggest challenge to be a full-time composer?
Probably the biggest is to find a way to support yourself. And one of the reasons that you might want to get like a terminal degree in your field is that it makes you hireable as a teacher of theory or music history and composition and stuff like that. It is also just a lot of work sitting in a room by yourself trying to create something from nothing, which if you're not equipped to do that for hours, then you'll have a hard time kind of being a composer if you don't like being by yourself for long periods of time. Yeah.
Do you find yourself having like a sort of like a split personality where you have to be an introvert when you're working on the music and then be an extrovert when you're networking for your music?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it is weird. You have to put on a completely different hat, and so you end up kind of like compartmentalizing yourself into a couple different people. It's interesting. Dr. Agosh, who's my studio teacher, actually does studio classes. She does a couple of studio classes. She's a great composition teacher. If anyone wants to like look her up, she teaches at New England Conservatory. But one of the things that she does is gets composers to actually learn how to talk about their music, not just write music, but to learn how to talk to each other and to an audience. And I think that's actually really important, because if you're not able to actually like go out in the world and kind of be able to like talk about yourself and like sell yourself and kind of convincingly translate your vision into words, then you will have a challenge in like as a career as a composer.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because as an artist, I consider ourselves as an artist. Like you have to be able to. I'm a musician myself, so I mean professionally, I play the violin and the piano. Professionally, I'm an engineer, but musically, yes, I'm a violinist and also a pianist. So as musicians, I consider ourselves as like artists. So I agree with you that we have to be able to translate art, which is something that we visualize or we hear, into something that we can explain, because not all of our audience are equipped to understand what we are trying to express through music, right?
Right. Yes.
All right.
And yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
Okay. So next question. Hi, Lavelle. Thank you for all your sharing. In your opinion, after this pandemic, what do you think the future holds for us musicians?
Ooh, that's a hard one. The world changed, right? The world changed last year in a big way, especially for any artist. Because, you at first you feel that insecurity because, the world doesn't necessarily view you as completely essential to making the world work. And so you're like, is this going to be the end of my career? But ultimately, there have been new opportunities actually that have popped up, at least for me. One of the things that is like, I think is not going to go away after the pandemic is over and we're kind of out in the world again, is the idea of online collaboration, especially screen sharing. Screen sharing is amazing. and I want to like be doing it for the rest. Like it's so helpful to actually like just show someone what you're doing. And even though, it's hard being isolated all the time, having that online benefit has been like very helpful, and it's quite convenient actually. because normally, I mean, in the old days, you would have to do it like over the phone or over like email or something. But like now you can just do things in real time. Like when I was working with Nick, I changed music in front of him. Like I shared the screen of the notation file that I was working on, and I just changed it. I was like, do you like this better? And we could do that just immediately. And that was amazing. I think that that'll be something that artists can use going forward, that you can actually show things to each other online. Like, I think that's going to be really important. And I think that like we should use this opportunity to create more solo repertoire and more like chamber work, things that you can perform in isolation, but also that you can take out into the real world as an option. Like find a composer who wants to write like 2 minutes of music and say, write me like a little piece and then I'll make a video of it. Like, I mean, it's, yeah, so.
Yeah, so speaking of online collaboration, do you think that one day in the future we would be able to play in sync in real time over the network?
There is technology to make that happen. I just am not great at using it yet. There's something called SoundJack, because a lot of singers and pianists had to find a way to collaborate. Like if you're a singer, you can't always be working with like a piano track. So there's a professor at NEC, his name is Ian Howell, who's a countertenor, who has been like a real pioneer in this live performance syncing remotely using SoundJack and a bunch of other technologies, and he kind of makes them talk to each other in this way that I don't really understand. But it is possible. It is possible.
All right, that's interesting to know, because I miss playing with people in real time instead of just recording myself and seeing the end product where everything is compiled for you. Yeah. All right.
It is.
Yeah. Go on.
No. I'm just saying it is possible. It's just it involves a lot of like plugging things here and making sure that like it's just a lot of moving parts.
All right. Hi, Mr. Blackwell. As a parent, how do I know if my kid is suited to study composition, and how should one go about learning to compose?
Ooh. So the first question is like very subjective, I think. I mean, again, I think you have to be comfortable being alone with your thoughts. I think that's helpful, like daydreaming and kind of just getting lost in your own mind. I think that's helpful for any creative artist. So if you think your child or offspring, child, I guess. If you think your child is comfortable just like sitting for long periods with his or her own thoughts, then they might be suited to the art of composition or any art, like any sort of creative art. Like he or she might be a painter or something like that. But to move to the second question, how do you learn how to compose music? That's a hard question. I think you learn how to compose music by composing music. It's one of those things that you have to learn by just doing it. It's like conducting is the same way, I think. Like you can study a book on conducting, you can study a book on composing, but you have to actually like write music and get it performed, even if you perform it yourself. Like I think you can learn a lot by just doing it. In terms of working with like teachers, it is what you're doing a lot of the time is getting reactions to the work that you've created. So that means that you have to actually just like write music And then someone else is going to tell you, oh, I think this could be better, or I think this is great. I think you should cut this or add something here. Also, another thing that's important to learn how to compose is to actually study scores, like visually, and listen to a lot of music. I would say a big help is to listen to music with either with some sort of visual component, like a score usually, or like lead sheets or something.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I took a course in film scoring, which is a branch of composition, and we do a lot of listening to scores and just studying scores to understand how composers work through the piece. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So do you think that it's important for composers to know or to be able to play an instrument before you start composing?
Yes, I would say it helps. I feel like the way to get into music, first of all, is as a listener. And if you're curious enough, then you will learn how to play something. I think that learning how to play an instrument gives you invaluable insights into what it's like to be a performer as a composer. And so you'll be more sensitive to performance issues. You're less likely to like write something unplayable if you understand what it's like to actually play an instrument or like sing or be a musician. So I think it is important.
So
But
what
like
about
you
for
don't have
yourself?
to, but you don't have to be like a virtuoso at anything. I just want to add that.
For yourself, how did you start composing?
So that another long question. So my first, my most experience as a musician is as a singer. So that was my way of studying music, was basically through studying parts that I would sing. I tend to prefer like choral singing versus solo singing. So my experience is as like a chorister. And I think I just internalized a lot of the things that I was singing and listening to, and decided to kind of like try and figure out what my response creatively to what I was listening to and what I liked, and to like copy it. I think I started composing by like trying to copy other composers, and then eventually I learned to kind of find my own creative voice.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Hi, what is your favorite group of instruments that you would like to compose for?
Ooh, I'm a big fan of large ensembles. I know that like this interview is specifically about chamber recitals, but my heart lies with like big orchestra works. Like I love to write like big works that use like 100 musicians. That's my favorite thing to do. So I guess my favorite would be like the Mahler Orchestra or something like that, or like a big sort of romantic triple wind, 25 violins kind of thing. I also really like wind ensemble, like wind band pieces, like octets and things like that.
So I think this next question would continue for that. Hello, Lavelle. Besides composing compositions for standard orchestral instruments, do you also compose for other instruments?
I've done a couple of electronic works. I would like to get more experience doing that. But for now, I should say I started out as a composer. Like my first compositions were for musical theater. So that was mostly like voice and piano, which is a different style than what I'm writing now. It was more kind of popular music oriented, and that don't use instruments at all, and there's no score. So that's different than what I normally do.
All right, so that would be our last question. So I'll wrap this up. On behalf of JPO, we would like to thank you for dedicating your time and energy into this interview, despite the pandemic that is happening right now. And we would also like to thank everyone who has tuned in and supported this program since last year. I hope you guys got the answer that you wanted. And for those who would like to share this video or revisit this interview, please check the link at our JPO Facebook page and stay tuned for more interviews coming for, I don't know until when. And now to the end of our interview, we will pray in whatever faith that we believe for the COVID-19. Okay, we pray that everyone in the world continues to stay strong in surviving through these difficult times. We pray that governments across the world would continue improving their efforts and decision-making so as to protect their people and curb the spread of the virus. We pray for the safety and well-being of everyone. We pray for the continued safety and morale of the frontliners who are risking their lives so that they may continue to provide for those in need. That is the end of our prayer. And once again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Lavelle, for coming in for our interview.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
All right, thank you. Bye.